So the robo umps are coming, and it's the ABS system, automated balls and strikes. From The Athletic, they do an anonymous poll. Are you in favor of the idea of robo umps calling balls and strikes? This is according to an anonymous player survey from The Athletic. So they polled 134 players. 85 of those said not in favor. You are not the father. 23 of the 134 are in favor of it, and then 26 of 134 are unsure. So I would be curious, and I don't have The Athletic, so it's behind the paywall, so I don't know what it was. How many were pitchers? Right? So you wonder if pitchers are for it or against it. So 63% say that they're not in favor of it. And 23 divided by 124, 17% say yes, and a little bit more than that are unsure. You know, Tyler, I've always been for, probably like the last 2 years, really ever since they started putting that stupid box up on the TV screen, because now everybody thinks they're an umpire, and you can clearly see the guys when they miss pitches. Before, it was a lot of times guys would have their strike zone. So if they had a bigger strike zone. So you would get more of the corner if you had this particular ump. You would get more of the inside corner with this particular ump. In the American League, you would have high strikes called. When they used to have American League umps, strictly American League umps. So you would get higher strikes called in the American League. It was a tighter zone in the National League. And the reasoning behind that was they had the designated hitter in the American League. So they felt like they had to give a bigger strike zone. So and my thing always was okay, well, so is it a subjective thing with umpiring as far as balls and strikes, or are you trying to call it to the letter of the rule, which is this is where the strike zone in, this is how it should be called. Major League Baseball is telling you they want it to be called in a uniform fashion by wanting to bring in a robot ump. They're calling a strike, they're calling a ball. To me, that makes perfect sense. The problem is, do they have the technology to do that to where it doesn't affect the game? And I used to be 100% for this ABS system. I just don't know when they're going to be ready for it. Because when I did watch it in spring training, I didn't like it. So I don't know.
I have been a big proponent of human umpires still with a check system. And I don't need it to be what they're doing in the independent league, which is truly a robot system, and it just signals down to the umpire. Umpire goes strike or ball, and that's it. I like the check system where if I don't agree with your call, I just go and we look at it and we take a look and we see, because there are game-changing dynamic type of pitches that are called or not called. I think about the 2023 World Series. Could you imagine in the 2023 World Series if we had the ABS? Because the final pitch of the 2023 World Series was a called third strike. Josh Sborz threw the pitch. It wasn't a strike. It was a strike that night because it was 9-0 or something like that. And the game was over. And could you imagine if we ABS the final call of the World Series? I think it would be comical. But right. I think there's an in-between where I'm okay with human umpiring because errors can be made. Umpiring is a difficult task. But I do think there needs to be a check because umpires for too long have gone on unchecked. There is no repercussion for being terrible at your job. Angel Hernandez for years was one of the worst umpires I've ever seen. Laz Diaz sucks. C.B. Buckner sucks. Joe West sucked. Now, let me ask you a question. How many good umpires can you name?
A guy who used to go to school with, Alan Porter.
Okay.
That's
More than most can do, right?
Right.
And the only one I go with is Pat Hoberg because he was the one that threw the perfect game in the World Series and then got busted for gambling.
Right. Jim Wolf, Randy Wolf's brother.
So when you say, hey, I can name more bad umpires than I can good umpires, I think there's merit to this system. When I was playing, my big thing was call the strike zone as it is. Just call the freaking strike zone. And the umpire's thought process was always if I'm consistent, then it's a strike tonight. I don't want to hear it's a strike tonight. I want to know what's letters to knees, plate to plate.
Right.
If you give me a half a ball outside or half a ball inside, I can live with it. But when you start creating your own strike zone, that's nonsense to me.
Right. I agree. Yeah, no, I agree. And It's a great point you make about the umpires, because I remember you brought up Joe West, but always knew the umpires' names. I always knew pretty much all the umpires' names. I guess it's better when you don't know the umpires.
I think 100% it's better when you don't know who they are,
because they're not instigating fights. They're not making bad calls. And here's the other thing. If you go on social media, you have accounts that track every friggin' pitch that's thrown. And then they give and then they rate the umpires. And it's so funny when they'll go through a game and it's like, oh my God, Laz Diaz missed 12, like not even close. Not even close. I was just quickly looking to see if there was a poll from the players before the pitch clock was rolled out. Because I can almost guarantee you that if you polled players or at least pitchers prior to the pitch clock being rolled out, they probably would have been against it significantly. So you remember Aaron Nola was bitching about it. Former pitchers were bitching about it. Mm-hmm. It's change, and nobody likes change. So it doesn't mean that because they don't like it that they shouldn't do it, because clearly the pitch clock has been very successful in speeding up games and making it a much better, and it's so much more, the games are so much more enjoyable. But yeah, so it is like
John, that's a scorecard from Saturday night. You're going to tell me that 89% success rate, overall accuracy, like, we shouldn't be checking that? He had an 81% called strike accuracy. You see how many pitches Brennan, and that's just one guy. You see how many pitches Brennan Miller missed in this game? There's like 15 missed calls there.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think players hate it until they actually have it, and they're like, you know what? Like, because I mean, honestly, I like, as fans, you kind of like being mad and bitching about missed calls, but like, yeah, that's fun until it screws your team and you lose,
right?
Because you get hosed, you get squeezed on should have been a called third strike, it wasn't. Then he walks him, then he gives him 2 outs, and then there's a home run and the game's over. Like, nobody wants that. And so I'm old enough to remember when people were against replay in the NFL. No, you don't want a replay. I want the calls right. That's what I want. I want the calls right. If the knee's down, great. I want more replay. I don't want to screw the game. I don't want subjective, like with the pass interference and replay in the NFL. They screwed that up. That was terrible, right? But if there's an obvious penalty, you grab the face mask of somebody, the helmet gets yanked, and it doesn't get called, why can't you review that? It's easy to review that with somebody that's up in the booth that sees it, slows down the play, says, yep, that's a 15-yard penalty. I like more replay. I just don't want the game negatively affected. And as long as they can do that, listen, ABS system's coming. The robot umps are coming 100%. In Major League Baseball. It's a matter of whether it's next year or not.
I've said I think it's the 2027, because the CBA is up after next season. I think it's going to get implemented into the next CBA heading into the 2027 season. And I just think that's a timeline that would work for most. It gives the umpires a year to prepare for it. It gives the players a year to prepare for it and understand the system. And it gets it written into a new contract, a new collective bargaining contract. So